How many of you have ever felt like giving up? By a show of hands. Okay? How many of you have actually given up on something? Okay, well, when is it acceptable to give up? I mean, I know life throws at us some curves, and sometimes we face insurmountable odds, but when is it acceptable to give up? When you lose a loved one? Maybe you receive a diagnosis of a terminal illness. Maybe you work on a job for 20 years only to wake up one morning and you no longer have a job and you have no retirement. Would that be an acceptable time? I would suggest that as long as you can see yourself beyond your situation, as long as you can see yourself beyond your circumstances, as long as you have imagination, it's not acceptable to give up. You see, imagination is more than just fanciful ideas in your head. Imagination is the way that we frame our world. Imagination creates the framework for our reality. Imagination is how we face our deepest and darkest challenges. You see, imagination shifts our perceptions, and our perceptions shape our world. There was a study done in 2014 by Ohio University, and they gathered together men and women with broken limbs, and half of them they told to allow your limb to heal naturally after the cast was placed on them. The other half they told, imagine yourself exercising that limb while in the cast. Well, when the cast came off, what do you think happened? Those who imagined themselves exercising that limb had stronger limbs than those who did not. Well, I know you're probably saying, well, that's good theoretically. Or you might be saying, well, if that's the case, I'll just imagine myself running 5 miles every morning. No. It doesn't work that way. No to the imaginary workouts. But imagination is a powerful, powerful influence. There was a little girl that was born back in the late 1800s, and she was born with no arms. No arms. Now, you'd probably think that she was placed in a home somewhere, would have to have someone to take care of her for the rest of her life. Her name was Betty Hinton, but that was not her story. Betty believed, Betty had an idea, Betty had an imagination that she would do amazing things, that she would do even impossible things. And she did. Even though they did not have modern prosthesis back at that time, no robotic limbs, but Betty somehow knew that she was designed for greatness. Did you not know that we build our lives, we build our reality on the stories that we tell ourselves? And those stories are written by our imagination. What stories does your imagination write for you? Our minds are so impacted with a powerful influence that if we don't use it, it often goes dormant. Did you not know that the brain does not distinguish between what is reality and what is imagination? There was a study done by University of Colorado at Boulder in 2018. And in this study, they studied the brain waves, the inner workings of the brain, and they found out that the same neural pathways that are activated when we imagine something are the same neural pathways that are activated when we actually do that thing or we actually live it out. So they concluded that imagination is a neurological reality. It's not a fanciful idea. It's a neurological reality because it affects the brain and the body. In 2011, Susan West of the Leadership Resource, she wrote an article. And in this article, she says that at birth, we are born with 100% usage of our imagination. 100%. But by the age of 7, that usage goes down to 4%. Now, that makes me sad. Does it make you sad? It's frustrating. From 100% to 4% in 7 years. What do we do about this? How do we change this? How do we change the trajectory of this creative being within us? Our creativity. I remember as I was growing up, I used to hear the words, "Get your head out of the clouds. Stop daydreaming." Anybody ever hear those words? It made you feel like there's something wrong with imagination. There's something wrong with dreaming. It made you feel like imagination was not valuable. So we grow up with this over our heads, hearing in the back of our mind, making us feel like imagination is not valuable. But imagination is how we create our world. Imagination creates the blueprints for our world, for our lives. You know how architects and engineers create blueprints and schematics for things that are to come? Now, what they create, I was an engineer for over 25 years with major telecommunication companies. What is created by architects and engineers is not the thing that's to come. But you can't get the thing that's to come without the blueprints and the schematics. So if we want a certain outcome, we've got to get the blueprints and the schematics in order to build it. And that is what our brain, our imagination does for us. It creates those blueprints so that we can have that future. There was a study done by Adobe in 2014. And Adobe did this study all over the world. Several different countries were involved. And what they found out, 75% of all adults feel that they're not living up to their creative potential. Are you one of those adults? 75%. Why is this? Now, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes we carry these things over our heads from childhood and feel like imagination is not valuable. But it is. You cannot create. Have you ever noticed how fewer and fewer new inventions there are? Fewer and fewer new cures are developed. Fewer and fewer new innovations are created. Where is the imagination? Athletes use something that is called visualization to become the elite athletes that they are. What they do is they imagine or they visualize a particular picture of themselves doing something. Michael Phelps, for instance, the Olympic swimmer, he uses visualization. And what he does, he allows his body to go into full relaxation. And then he swims his race over and over and over, hundreds of times in his mind. So by the time he gets on the blocks, his body goes into autopilot because his brain already knows the race he has to swim. Visualization is a powerful tool, but imagination goes even deeper than visualization. Visualization creates a picture of something that we've seen, something that we expect, something that we have experienced. Imagination, however, delves into those things that we have never seen, we've never experienced, that we do not know of. Remember the story that I told you about the little girl that was born with no arms? Well, she had been telling herself that she was going to do some great things, and she did. Matter of fact, she became a pianist. Now, I can see the wheels turning in your head right now. How in the world did she become a pianist? She had no arms, she had no hands, she had no fingers. How did she become a pianist? Well, she played the piano with her toes. And she became so good that she played all over the South for different events. And that's how she made her living. Now, she had never seen an armless, handless, fingerless pianist, but she had imagined it. And she became what she imagined. Betty Hinton was my great-grandmother, and she had a powerful imagination. But so do you. So do you. It may have diminished over the years. It may not be as strong, but it takes cultivating, strengthening. So how do we get there? How do we get that strong, powerful imagination? Number one, you have to give yourself permission to imagine again. Release those judgments that hang over your head. Those things that you hear in the back of your mind saying imagination is not important. And I don't know where we get this idea that we have to fill every waking moment with something, even though it may not be anything of any value. But we feel like we can't. How many of you have heard the phrase, an idle mind is the devil's workshop? Well, an imagining mind is not an idle mind. Give yourself permission to imagine again. Adopt a what-if thinking. What if we did this? What if? What if our workplace would allow for 1 to 2 hours every day, not to production, but to creating solutions for problems that have not been solved? What if they allowed us to start using our imagination to create new things, new innovations, and not production? Number two, you have to start challenging the status quo. Challenge the things that we have accepted all of our lives. Ask questions. Always ask questions. Ask the why questions. One thing I love about children, and I think it's so amazing, but I've got to admit it's kind of irritating too. Children have such a sense of wonder about the world. You present them with some facts, some ideas, you present them with accepted knowledge, and they'll turn around and say, why? Or as my granddaughter would say, and what else? They don't want the cut and dry answers. They want to hear the inner workings of things. Adopt a why mentality. Ask the questions. You may be irritating to somebody, but ask the questions anyway. Keep asking questions. Always ask questions. We become too accepting often as adults because it's easy. You talk to someone and you present them with information, they nod their head and say, yeah. You don't want to ask questions because it's easier to just walk off and say, okay. Ask questions. Thirdly, you have to get to a place where you can find a place of solace, a place where you can open your mind, a place where you can dream without judgment, where you can think about things and allow it to just roll over in your mind, considering different options and speaking to yourself. You know, actual vocalization taps into our emotions, and our emotions fuel our imagination. Find your place. Wherever it is, find it and use it every time you can. So what I want to leave with you, imagination is not something that we grow out of. It's something that we have to grow back into. What if you used yours? What if you allowed yourself to imagine? What could you create? What solution could you be? So asking the question last time, when is it acceptable to give up? Never, because imagination will always, always, always find a way. Thank you.